I was in a museum when a woman handed me a note. Act normal, smile, leave when I do. I looked up and she whispered, "That man is following you." When I turned around, I froze. I couldn't believe who was there. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Riverside Art Museum, casting geometric shadows across the marble floor. I stood before a Turner landscape, admiring the way he captured light on water, when I felt the gentle pressure of paper pressed into my palm. Act normal. Smile. Leave when I do. The woman beside me was perhaps 50, dressed in a navy blazer and pearl earrings, the kind of person who blended perfectly into museum crowds. She smiled at the painting as if we were discussing brushwork techniques. "That man is following you," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "The one in the gray suit near the Roman sculptures. Don't look directly." My heart began a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. I'm 63 years old. I've raised 3 children, buried a husband, and managed a small bookkeeping business from my home in Cedar Falls, Oregon for 30 years. Nothing prepares you for a moment like this, no matter how many crime novels you've read. I turned slowly, naturally, as if considering the next gallery. That's when I saw him. Donald Holloway. The blood drained from my face. I recognized that angular jaw, those cold blue eyes, even though I'd only met him twice before. Both times at my son James's house. Both times under circumstances that seemed perfectly normal at the time. "You know him," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "He's my son's business partner," I managed. "Was. James said he bought him out 6 months ago. Said Donald moved to Singapore." The woman's expression tightened. "Mrs. Jackson, my name is Jennifer Keating. I'm a private investigator. We need to talk, but not here. Follow my lead in 3 minutes." She moved away before I could respond, pausing at a Monet exhibit across the gallery. My hands trembled as I clutched my purse. Donald Holloway was supposed to be gone. James had thrown a small celebration dinner when the buyout finalized. Steaks on the grill, expensive wine, his wife Melissa beaming as she talked about finally expanding their house. I glanced toward the Roman sculptures. Donald was examining a marble bust, but his eyes flicked toward me every few seconds. He wore the same expensive watch I remembered, the same perfectly tailored suit. He didn't look like a man who'd moved halfway around the world. He looked like a man on a mission. The note in my hand felt like it weighed 10 pounds. I unfolded it carefully. "Your son didn't buy me out. He stole from me. $2.3 million. I've been watching your family for 3 months. You're the only one who might help me understand why. Trust no one. JK." My legs went weak. I steadied myself against the gallery wall, pretending to read a placard about impressionist techniques. $2.3 million. The number swam before my eyes. James ran a commercial real estate consulting firm. Successful, legitimate, or so I'd always believed. He'd started the company 8 years ago with Donald, back when James was 35 and hungry to prove himself after his father's death. They'd grown the business from a 2-person operation to 15 employees. James bought a beautiful colonial in the nicer part of Cedar Falls. His 2 daughters, my granddaughters, attended private school. I thought I knew my son. Jennifer Keating caught my eye and nodded toward the exit. I forced my feet to move, one step at a time, past Renaissance paintings and Greek pottery. My reflection in the glass cases looked pale, older than my years. Donald followed at a distance. The museum cafe bustled with the lunch crowd. Jennifer sat at a corner table, her back to the wall, positioned where she could see both entrances. I slid into the chair across from her, my mouth dry as cotton. "He's not coming in," Jennifer said quietly. "He knows I'm here. We have maybe 10 minutes before he repositions. Tell me what's happening." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Tell me everything." She pulled out a slim folder from her bag. Inside were photographs. James at various locations around Cedar Falls, at a restaurant in Portland, entering an office building I didn't recognize. Timestamps on each image. "Donald Holloway hired me 4 months ago," Jennifer began. "Initially, it was a standard case. He claimed your son had committed fraud during their partnership dissolution. He wanted documentation for a lawsuit. But the deeper I dug, the stranger it got. The buyout paperwork exists. I've seen it. Legal, notarized, filed properly. $1.8 million paid to Holloway for his 50% stake in Holloway Whitmore Consulting. Then what's the problem? Jennifer leaned forward. The problem is that $500,000 of that money came from an account Donald never knew existed. An account in the Cayman Islands, registered to a shell company, funded by loans taken out against properties your son claimed the business owned. Properties that don't exist. The cafe noise faded to a dull buzz. That's impossible. James wouldn't— There's more. Jennifer slid another document across the table. 3 weeks after the buyout, Donald started receiving threats. Anonymous emails, phone calls from burner numbers, all saying the same thing. Leave town, forget about the business, or his family would pay the price. I stared at the printed emails. The language was cold, professional, terrifying. Donald has a daughter at University of Washington, Jennifer continued. Someone sent him photos of her walking to class, eating lunch, studying in the library. He got scared, really scared. So he did what they wanted. He made it look like he'd moved abroad, changed his phone number, told people he was starting over in Singapore. But he stayed local, under a different name, and hired me to find out who was behind the threats. And you think it's James? I think it's more complicated than that. Jennifer pulled out another photo. This one showed Melissa, my daughter-in-law, getting into a black Mercedes with an older man I didn't recognize. Do you know who this is? I shook my head. Richard Caldwell, real estate developer, city councilman, and according to my research, someone with significant connections to some very questionable business deals. He's been seen with Melissa repeatedly over the past 6 months. Never with James. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the table. Mrs. Jackson, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Jennifer's brown eyes held mine with an intensity that made it clear this was the real question, the one everything else had been building toward. Has James asked you about your house recently? About your property deed? Your will? Anything financial? The memory hit me like cold water. 2 weeks ago, James had stopped by on a Tuesday afternoon, which was unusual. He typically visited on Sundays with the girls. He'd seemed distracted, kept checking his phone, and then, almost casually, as we drank tea in my kitchen, he'd asked if I'd ever considered putting the house in a trust. Just for estate planning, he'd said with that charming smile that had gotten him out of trouble since he was 6 years old. It would protect the asset, Mom. And with property values rising, it makes sense to have everything documented properly. I'd told him I'd think about it. He'd left, kissed my cheek, said he'd send over some information about a lawyer who could help. I hadn't heard from him since. He mentioned estate planning, I said slowly. Wanted me to put the house in a trust. Jennifer's expression darkened. When? 2 weeks ago. He said he'd send information about a lawyer, but I stopped. He hasn't called. He always calls on Sundays to check in, even when he's busy. Mrs. Jackson, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Jennifer's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Don't sign anything. Don't make any financial changes. And most importantly, don't tell James we spoke. Why? What's happening? She glanced toward the cafe entrance, then back to me. Donald isn't the only one watching your son. The FBI has been investigating a commercial real estate fraud ring operating in Oregon and Washington for 18 months. Money laundering, shell companies, fraudulent loans. They're building a case, but they don't have enough evidence yet to make arrests. The word FBI made my chest constrict. Richard Caldwell is their primary target, Jennifer continued, but they believe he has partners. Younger men who handle the day-to-day operations while Caldwell provides the political connections and the veneer of legitimacy. You think James is one of those partners? I think James got involved in something that grew far beyond what he intended. I think Donald figured it out, and that's why your son had to push him out. But the question that keeps me awake at night is this. What does your house have to do with any of it? Before I could answer, Jennifer's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. We need to leave. Now. Different exits. What's wrong? Donald just texted me. He says there's another man here, and this one isn't watching you. She stood quickly, gathering her folder. He's watching me. My blood turned to ice. What does that mean? It means someone knows I'm investigating, and they want to know what I've found. Jennifer pressed a business card into my hand. Memorize my number. Destroy this card. If you need me, use a payphone or a burner phone, never your cell. Trust absolutely no one in your family until we know the full truth. Wait. But she was already moving toward the rear exit, her navy blazer disappearing into the crowd of museum visitors. I sat frozen for a moment, my mind racing. Then I forced myself to stand, to walk calmly toward the main entrance, to act like a normal woman who'd simply enjoyed some art on a Thursday afternoon. Donald Holloway was gone from the sculpture gallery, but as I stepped into the October sunshine, I caught a glimpse of a man in a dark jacket near the parking lot, holding a phone to his ear, his gaze fixed on the museum entrance. He watched me walk to my car. He watched me drive away. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that my life had just become exponentially more dangerous than anything I'd ever imagined. That night, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd raised my children, where James had done his homework at the oak table, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, and I pulled out the one thing I hadn't told Jennifer about. 3 days ago, a plain manila envelope had arrived in my mail. No return address. Inside was a single page, a photocopy of a property deed transfer document dated next month, showing my house, my home of 35 years, being transferred to something called Riverside Holdings LLC. My signature was already on the document, except I'd never signed anything. I spread the paper on the table under the bright kitchen light, studying the signature that looked almost exactly like mine. Almost, but not quite. The loop on the W was too tight. The final flourish on the E too long. Someone had forged my signature. Someone was planning to steal my house. And I was willing to bet everything I owned that I knew exactly who that someone was. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house settling, every distant car engine made my pulse jump. At 3 a.m, I stood at my bedroom window watching the street, wondering if someone was out there in the darkness, watching back. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I needed answers, and I needed them before whoever forged my signature made their next move. But I also needed to be smart. If James was involved in something criminal, and everything pointed toward that terrible conclusion, then approaching him directly would only warn him I knew. I thought about my other children. Sarah, my eldest, lived in Boston with her husband and teenage son. We talked monthly, brief conversations about weather and grandchildren. She'd always been distant, more interested in her corporate law career than family connections. Then there was Michael, my youngest, a high school teacher in Portland. Sweet, idealistic Michael who'd always looked up to James, who'd borrowed money from his older brother to buy his first car, his first house. If James was corrupt, Michael would be the last person to believe it. No, I was alone in this. I spent Friday morning doing something I'd never done before, lying to my own son. James called at 9 o'clock, his voice cheerful and casual. "Hey, Mom. Sorry I haven't checked in. Work's been crazy. How are you doing?" "Fine, sweetheart. Just the usual. Garden's preparing for winter." I kept my tone light, grandmother-like, harmless. "Did you ever send that lawyer's information? For the estate planning?" A pause. Brief, but I caught it. "Oh, yeah. I've been meaning to. Actually, I found someone really good. His office is in Portland, but he makes house calls for senior clients. Very convenient. I was thinking maybe next week? I could bring him by. We could go through everything together." Senior clients. The phrase stung, calculated to make me feel old, dependent, grateful for his help. "That sounds lovely," I lied. "Tuesday afternoon works well for me." "Perfect. I'll set it up and confirm with you." His relief was audible. "Love you, Mom." "Love you too." I hung up and immediately grabbed my car keys. The Cedar Falls Public Library opened at 10. I arrived 15 minutes early, watching the parking lot from across the street, checking for any cars that seemed too interested in my presence. Jennifer's paranoia was infectious, but I couldn't afford to be careless. The reference librarian, a young woman named Bethany, helped me access the property records database. I'd never done online research beyond email and recipe websites, but Bethany walked me through each step patiently. Riverside Holdings LLC appeared in the system, registered 3 months ago. The registered agent was an attorney named Lawrence Pemberton, address in downtown Portland. I searched for James's business next. Holloway Whitmore Consulting had dissolved 6 months ago, exactly as James had told me. But a new entity had formed 1 week later, Jackson Property Solutions, LLC. James was listed as CEO. The business address was the same office building I'd seen in Jennifer's photographs. My hands shook as I wrote everything down in my small notebook, disguising my research as someone looking up genealogy records in case anyone asked. Then I made a mistake. I searched for Richard Caldwell, the city councilman Jennifer had mentioned. Pages of results appeared. City council meetings, real estate development projects, charitable foundation work. Respectable, legitimate, exactly the kind of civic leader Cedar Falls was proud of. But buried in the archives, I found something else. A news article from 12 years ago about a commercial development deal that had collapsed. Investors had lost money. Caldwell's name appeared alongside 2 other businessmen who'd been sued but never charged. The case had been settled quietly. Sealed records. No admission of wrongdoing. One of the other names in that article was Thomas Jackson, my late husband. I stared at the screen, the library around me fading to nothing. Thomas had died 8 years ago from a heart attack. Sudden and devastating. He'd been a commercial property appraiser, honest and meticulous. He'd never mentioned knowing Richard Caldwell. He'd certainly never mentioned a lawsuit. "Ma'am? Are you all right?" Bethany was looking at me with concern. "Fine," I whispered. "Just need some air." I printed the article with trembling hands and left before my legs could give out. In my car, I reread the article 3 times. Thomas hadn't been accused of wrongdoing. He'd been the appraiser who'd provided valuations that turned out to be inflated. The article noted that investigators found no evidence he'd known the values were being manipulated by the developers. He'd been a tool, not a conspirator. But James would have been 23 when this happened, old enough to remember, old enough to learn from. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mrs. Jackson?" A man's voice, professional but urgent. "This is Donald Holloway. Please don't hang up." My heart hammered. "How did you get this number?" "From the museum security footage. I enhanced the image of you talking to Jennifer, saw the business card she gave you, tracked down her records. I'm sorry for the intrusion, but we're running out of time." "Time for what?" "To stop whatever's happening on Tuesday." His voice was strained. "I've been monitoring James's communications. Don't ask how. He's bringing more than a lawyer to your house. There's going to be someone else there. Someone who specializes in, let's call it aggressive estate management." "What does that mean?" "It means they're going to pressure you to sign documents immediately. They'll have everything ready. Notary, witnesses, the works. They'll make it seem urgent, legal, necessary. And once you sign, your house won't be yours anymore." I gripped the phone. "Why are you helping me? Jennifer said you're suing James." "I am, but not because I want revenge." Donald's voice softened. "Because I know what it's like to be betrayed by someone you trust. James was my friend, Mrs. Jackson. I thought we were building something legitimate together. By the time I realized what he was really doing, I was in too deep. He threatened my daughter to keep me quiet. I can't let him do the same thing to his own mother. What was he really doing? Tell me everything." Donald took a deep breath. "Your son is running a loan fraud scheme. He identifies elderly homeowners with valuable property, people who are isolated, vulnerable, trusting. He befriends them, often through church groups or community organizations. Then he convinces them to refinance their homes or take out equity loans, promising to invest the money safely and give them better returns than any bank." My stomach turned. "The money goes into shell companies," Donald continued. "It gets layered through multiple accounts, then used to fund legitimate-looking real estate deals. On paper, everything looks clean, but the elderly homeowners never see returns. Eventually, they default on the loans they didn't understand they'd taken. They lose their homes. Meanwhile, James and his partners acquire the properties at foreclosure auctions for pennies on the dollar. How many people? I whispered. That I know of? 17 in the past 3 years? Probably more before I joined the company. I didn't figure it out until last year. I thought we were doing legitimate consulting work. When I confronted James, he said I was already implicated in everything. He had documents with my signature, emails that made it look like I was the one running the scheme. He gave me a choice. Take the buyout and disappear, or he'd make sure I took the fall alone. And my house? Your house is different. More valuable. It's in a prime location for commercial development. But more than that, I think this is personal for James. I think he needs to prove something. Prove what? That he's smarter than his father was. That he won't make the same mistakes. The words hit like a physical blow. You know about the lawsuit, the one Thomas was involved in. James talked about it once when he was drunk, Donald said quietly. He said his father was a fool who let other men get rich off his work while he stayed poor and honest. He said he'd learned the most important lesson of his life from watching your husband. That in business, nice guys don't just finish last. They finish broke. I closed my eyes, fighting tears. Thomas wasn't broke. We had enough. We were happy. I know. But James saw it differently. He saw a man who died without leaving his family wealthy, and he decided he'd never let that happen to him. A car pulled into the parking lot 3 spaces away. A woman got out, headed into the library. Normal, routine. But I'd stopped trusting normal. What do I do? I asked. How do I stop Tuesday from happening? Don't be home, Donald said immediately. Go somewhere he can't find you. Give me time to gather more evidence. Jennifer and I are working on something, but we need a few more days. I can't just run away. This is my home. And what about my grandchildren? What about... My phone beeped. Another call coming through. James. I have to go, I told Donald. He's calling. Mrs. Jackson, listen to me. James is not the son you think he is anymore. Maybe he never was. Whatever he says, whatever promises he makes, remember, he's willing to steal your home. He's willing to leave you with nothing. Don't let love make you blind. He hung up. James's call went to voicemail. I listened to it with shaking hands. Hey, Mom. Great news. I got that lawyer scheduled for Tuesday at 2. His name is Lawrence Pemberton. Really top-notch guy. Melissa wants to come too, help explain some of the financial stuff in terms that are easier to understand. We'll bring lunch. Can't wait to see you. Love you. Lawrence Pemberton. The same name listed as registered agent for Riverside Holdings, LLC. My son wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. He thought I was too old, too trusting, too naive to connect the dots. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning through options. I could call the police, but Jennifer had said the FBI was already investigating. Getting local police involved might compromise their case. I could confront James directly, but that would only accelerate whatever timeline he was working with. Or I could do what Donald suggested and disappear for a few days. But running felt like surrender. And I hadn't raised 3 children and run a business for 30 years by surrendering. I needed leverage. I needed something James didn't know I had. At home, I went straight to the attic. Thomas's files were still there, packed in banker's boxes, organized by year. I'd kept everything after his death, unable to throw away his meticulous records. At the time, I'd thought I was being sentimental. Now I realized I was being prepared. I found the box labeled 2013, the year of the lawsuit, and carried it downstairs. Inside were appraisal reports, correspondence with attorneys, notes in Thomas's careful handwriting. He'd documented everything, including several conversations where developers had asked him to adjust his valuations upward. He'd refused. He'd been threatened. He'd reported the threats to his supervisor. There were names in these files, companies, properties. And there, in a document dated 3 months before Thomas died, was a memo about a new appraiser being hired by one of the firms involved in the lawsuit. A young appraiser, just starting out, willing to be more flexible with valuations. The appraiser's name was James Jackson. I sat at my kitchen table as afternoon light faded to evening, reading my husband's words, understanding for the first time the weight he'd carried. Thomas had known James was making the wrong choices. He'd tried to warn him, and James had interpreted those warnings as weakness. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Check your front door. Don't open it. Just look. JK." I walked to the front window and peered out carefully. There was an envelope taped to my door, bright white against the dark wood. I didn't retrieve it. Instead, I called Jennifer from my landline. "Did you put that there?" I asked when she answered. "No, I'm 3 blocks away, watching your house. Someone else delivered it 10 minutes ago. White sedan, couldn't get the plates. They were gone before I could intercept. What do I do? Wait until dark. I'll come get it. Jennifer, I found something. About my husband and James. About how far back this goes. Hold on to it. We'll need it." She paused. "Mrs. Jackson, I have to tell you something. Donald called me an hour ago. He's disappeared. His apartment is empty. His car is gone. He left me a voicemail saying he had to leave town immediately, that someone connected to Caldwell found out he was still in Oregon." My blood ran cold. "Is he safe?" "I don't know. But it means they're cleaning house, getting rid of loose ends." Her voice hardened. "You need to understand what that means for you. You're not just a target for fraud anymore. You're a witness to James's crimes. And witnesses can be dangerous." The envelope on my door seemed to glow in the gathering darkness. "What do you think is in there?" I whispered. "Only one way to find out. But Mrs. Jackson, whatever it says, don't let them scare you into making mistakes. Fear is their weapon. Don't give them that power." After dark, Jennifer retrieved the envelope using gloves. She opened it in her car while I watched from my window, both of us connected by phone. "It's a legal document," she said. "A notice of guardianship proceedings. Someone has filed paperwork claiming you're mentally incompetent to manage your own affairs. They're requesting an emergency hearing next Monday." The room spun. "Who filed it?" Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Your daughter-in-law, Melissa. She's claiming you've shown signs of dementia and confusion. She has statements from 3 witnesses, a neighbor, your doctor's receptionist, and someone from your bank. And Mrs. Jackson, the petition says James is too emotionally compromised to file it himself because he's in denial about your condition. It's actually quite clever. It makes him look innocent and devoted while still getting the outcome they want." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "If they get guardianship," Jennifer continued, "they'll have legal control over all your assets, including your house. And there won't be anything you can do to stop it." I spent Saturday morning doing something that would have seemed paranoid a week ago, but now felt like survival. I photocopied everything. Thomas's files, the forged deed transfer, the guardianship petition, every scrap of evidence I'd gathered. I made 3 copies of each document, storing them in different locations. One set in my safe deposit box at the bank, one with my neighbor Dorothy, who thought I was just organizing estate papers, and one hidden in a waterproof bag buried in my garden beneath the rose bushes. If they wanted to declare me incompetent, I'd show them exactly how competent I was. By noon, I was exhausted, but clear-headed. I made myself eat lunch, tomato soup and crackers, though everything tasted like sawdust. I was washing dishes when my phone rang. Sarah, my daughter, calling from Boston on a Saturday afternoon. We never talked on Saturdays. "Mom? Hi, do you have a minute?" Her voice had that lawyer tone she used, professional and slightly distant. "Of course, sweetheart. How are you?" "I'm fine. Listen, James called me last night. He's worried about you." She paused, and I could hear papers rustling. "He said you've been acting strangely, forgetting things. He mentioned you asked him about estate planning but then couldn't remember the conversation." My grip tightened on the phone. "That's not true. I remember everything perfectly. Mom, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Memory issues are completely normal at your age. James just wants to make sure you're taken care of. We all do. Sarah, I'm 63, not 93. My mind is fine. But you live alone in that big house. And James said you've been asking repetitive questions, getting confused about dates." Her voice softened with manufactured sympathy. "He showed me some concerning emails you sent him, rambling, disjointed. Not like you at all. Ice flooded my veins. What emails? The ones from last week. About Dad's old files asking about people James doesn't even know. He said you've been obsessing over things that happened years ago, getting upset about business deals that have nothing to do with you. I'd never sent James any emails about Thomas's files. I'd barely spoken to him since the museum. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I haven't sent James any strange emails. I haven't forgotten any conversations. Someone is lying to you. Mom, your brother is trying to steal my house. He's involved in criminal activity, and he's building a case to have me declared incompetent so I can't stop him. The silence that followed was worse than any argument. Mom, Sarah said finally, her voice now clinical, detached. This is exactly what James was worried about. Paranoid thinking. Accusations against family members. These are classic signs. Classic signs of what? Of cognitive decline, of someone who needs help. She took a breath. I'm flying out tomorrow. I've already booked the ticket. We're going to sit down together. You, me, James, Michael. And we're going to figure out the best way to support you through this. Sarah, please. You have to believe me. I love you, Mom. We'll talk more when I get there. Try to rest. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen, the phone dead in my hand, understanding with crystalline clarity what was happening. James had gotten to Sarah first. He'd shown her manufactured evidence, planted seeds of doubt about my mental state, positioned himself as the concerned son trying to help a declining mother. And Sarah, who'd always been more interested in legal precedents than family bonds, had looked at the evidence and made her professional assessment. They were building an airtight case. Medical concerns from James, legal documentation from Melissa, corroboration from Sarah. By Monday's guardianship hearing, I'd be facing not just my son, but my entire family, all united in their conviction that I needed to be saved from myself. I called Jennifer immediately. They've turned my daughter against me, I said without preamble. James manufactured emails, convinced Sarah I'm having memory problems. She's flying out tomorrow to stage some kind of intervention. How many people will be at this intervention? Sarah said all my children. James, Michael, and her. That's good, Jennifer said, surprising me. How is that possibly good? Because it means they're rushing. Desperate people make mistakes. I heard papers shuffling on her end. I've been digging deeper into Richard Caldwell. The man is meticulous. 30 years in business without a single indictment. But 3 months ago, something changed. He started liquidating assets, moving money offshore, closing down legitimate business ventures. Classic signs someone knows an investigation is closing in. What does that have to do with James? Everything, because James is Caldwell's exit strategy. Jennifer's voice was intense. Think about it. Caldwell needs to transfer his operation to someone young, clean, with no obvious connection to his past crimes. Someone who can inherit the network while Caldwell retires to a country with no extradition treaty. But James is not clean. You said the FBI is investigating the fraud ring. They're investigating the ring, but they don't have evidence directly tying James to Caldwell. Not yet. James has been careful. Everything runs through intermediaries, shell companies, lawyers. On paper, he looks like a legitimate businessman who happened to have a dishonest partner named Donald Holloway. The pieces clicked together. Donald was the fall guy from the beginning. Exactly? And now James needs capital to expand the operation before Caldwell leaves. Your house is worth at least $800,000. But more than that, stealing from his own mother, getting away with it cleanly, proves to Caldwell that James has the ruthlessness this business requires. I felt sick. This is a test. It's an audition. And Mrs. Jackson, if James passes it, if he successfully takes everything from you while making you look incompetent and himself look like a devoted son, then he becomes Caldwell's heir. Which means the fraud scheme that's hurt 17 people becomes a multi-state operation that could hurt hundreds. The weight of it pressed down on me. This wasn't just about my house anymore. This was about stopping something much larger, much darker. What's our move? I asked. We need evidence linking James directly to Caldwell's criminal activity. Something the FBI can use, and we need it before Monday's hearing. Jennifer paused. There's something else. I made contact with an FBI agent who's been working the Caldwell case, Special Agent Torres. She's willing to talk to you off the record, but it has to be today. Tonight. Where? I'll text you the address. Come alone. And Mrs. Jackson, bring Thomas's files. Torres thinks your late husband might have documented more than he realized. At 7 o'clock, I drove to a coffee shop in Portland, 40 minutes from Cedar Falls. The place was nearly empty. Just a few college students with laptops and a couple talking quietly in the corner. Jennifer sat at a back table with a woman in her 40s. Dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes that assessed me the moment I walked in. Mrs. Jackson, this is Special Agent Carmen Torres, FBI White Collar Crime Division. Torres didn't offer her hand. Let's be clear about something up front. This conversation is not official. I'm not here as an FBI agent. If you repeat anything I say, I'll deny we ever met. Understood? I nodded, sliding into the booth. Jennifer says you have files related to Thomas Jackson's appraisal work from 2013. I placed the folder on the table. Torres opened it, scanning pages with practiced efficiency. Her expression remained neutral, but I saw her pause on certain documents, saw her eyes narrow. Your husband was thorough, she said finally. These notes about pressure from developers, these names, this corroborates information we've been trying to verify for months. Will it help your case against Caldwell? It helps establish pattern and timeline, but Caldwell is sophisticated. He never touches anything directly. We need someone inside his operation willing to testify. Torres looked at me directly. We thought Donald Holloway might be that person, but he's disappeared, and frankly, his credibility is compromised by his involvement in the fraud scheme. What about James? The words hurt to say. If you gave him immunity, would he testify against Caldwell? Torres's expression hardened. Your son is not a small player, Mrs. Jackson. Based on what we've uncovered, James Jackson has been actively running the elder fraud operation for 3 years. Donald Holloway was involved for 18 months. James recruited him, trained him, and when Donald developed a conscience, your son systematically destroyed his life to keep him quiet. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm. How many people has he hurt? 23 that we can prove, probably more. Total losses exceed $4 million. Most victims were too ashamed to report it, or by the time they realized what happened, the money was gone and the trail was cold. 23 people. Elderly people like me, trusting their savings to someone who seemed legitimate, professional, kind. There's something you need to understand, Torres continued. We've been building this case for 18 months. We're close, maybe 3 weeks from having enough evidence for indictments. But if your son suspects we're onto him, if anything spooks him into running, we lose everything. Caldwell walks, James walks, and 24 families never see justice. What are you saying? I'm saying that whatever's happening with your house, with this guardianship petition, you need to play along. Let it happen. Let James think he's winning. I stared at her. You want me to let my son steal my house? I want you to help us put him in prison where he belongs. Torres leaned forward. The guardianship hearing on Monday. That's a gift. It gets all the key players in one room, on the record, making legal claims that we can later prove were fraudulent. If you fight it, if you expose what you know now, James gets spooked and runs. But if you seem confused, vulnerable, exactly what they expect, then they'll get overconfident. They'll make mistakes. And I lose my home. Temporarily. Once we make arrests, everything gets frozen as evidence. Your property can't be transferred or sold. And when the case goes to trial, fraudulent transfers get reversed. You'd get your house back. You're asking me to trust the system. My voice was bitter. The same system that let Caldwell operate for 30 years. The same system that almost destroyed my husband over something he didn't do. Torres didn't flinch. I'm asking you to trust that some of us still care about getting it right. And I'm telling you that you're not alone in this anymore. Jennifer spoke up quietly. Mrs. Jackson, there's another factor. Your grandchildren. James's daughters. If this goes to trial and James faces serious prison time, those girls will need family who isn't incarcerated or complicit. They'll need their grandmother. The thought of Emma and Sophie, 9 and 11 years old, innocent, about to watch their world explode, made my chest ache. What would I have to do? I asked. Torres pulled out a small device, no bigger than a button. Wear a wire to the family meeting tomorrow. Record everything. We need James, Melissa, and Sarah on tape discussing the guardianship petition and the property transfer. We need them spelling out their plans in their own words. That's it? That's the first step. Then at the Monday hearing, you play the part they expect. Confused, forgetful, easily led. Let them get guardianship. Let them think they've won. And then? Then we move fast. We have search warrants ready to execute the moment we have enough evidence. Once we raid James's office and Caldwell's properties, the whole network collapses. Torres's expression softened slightly. I know what I'm asking. But Mrs. Jackson, we're talking about stopping a criminal enterprise that's destroyed lives. Your son made his choices. Now, you have to make yours. I thought about Thomas, about his careful notes, his refusal to compromise his integrity even when threatened. I thought about the 23 families who'd lost everything to my son's greed. I thought about what kind of person I wanted to be in this moment. Give me the wire, I said. Torres produced a small recording device and showed me how to wear it, hidden beneath my blouse. Test it tomorrow morning. Make sure it's working. And Mrs. Jackson, be careful. If James suspects you're recording, if he finds this device, you're in serious danger. These people have already threatened Donald Holloway's daughter. They've already forged legal documents in your name. Don't underestimate what they're willing to do. We left the coffee shop separately, me first, then Jennifer 10 minutes later, Torres last. I drove home through dark October streets, hyper-aware of every car behind me, every shadow. At home, I found another envelope on my door. Inside was a single photograph. Me, at the library, looking at the computer screen showing Richard Caldwell's name. Someone had been watching. Someone had documented my research. On the back of the photo, handwritten in neat script, "Stop asking questions. You won't like the answers." But underneath that message, in different handwriting, rushed and urgent, someone had written, "Your son knows you met with the FBI. Get out of the house. Now." I didn't recognize either handwriting. I stood on my porch, photograph trembling in my hand, trying to understand who had delivered this warning and why. Then my house phone rang, at 10:30 at night. I went inside, locked the door, and answered. Heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice I didn't recognize, electronically distorted. "You should have stayed out of it, Mrs. Jackson. Now you've made this personal. Who is this?" "Someone who's been cleaning up Richard Caldwell's messes for 20 years. Your husband almost became a problem once. We handled it. Now, you're becoming a problem." The distorted voice paused. "Heart attacks are so common in people your age. So tragic. So sudden." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the implication clear and terrible. Thomas hadn't died of natural causes. Someone had killed him. And now they were threatening to kill me, too. I didn't stay in my house that night. I packed a small bag, took the most important documents, and drove to a budget motel 30 miles away, registering under my maiden name. I paid cash. I kept the lights off and the curtains drawn, sitting on the edge of the bed until dawn, replaying that distorted voice in my mind. Heart attacks are so common in people your age. Thomas had been 55 when he died. Healthy, active, no history of heart problems. The autopsy said massive coronary event, sudden and fatal. No one had questioned it. Why would they? Middle-aged men died of heart attacks every day. But if someone had wanted to silence him, to stop him from exposing what he knew about Caldwell's operation, a staged heart attack would be perfect. No investigation, no suspicion, just grief and acceptance. I'd spent 8 years mourning my husband. Now, I was confronting the possibility that I should have been demanding justice. At 6 in the morning, I called Jennifer from the motel landline. "They killed Thomas," I said without preamble. "That phone call last night, they as much as admitted it." "I know. Torres called me an hour ago. They're tracing the call, but it came from a burner phone, probably already destroyed." Jennifer's voice was tight with worry. "Mrs. Jackson, You can't go back to your house. It's not safe. I have to. Sarah arrives at noon. James is planning the family intervention for this afternoon. If I don't show up, they'll use it as more evidence I'm incompetent. Or worse, they'll come looking for me. Then I'm coming with you. I'll be nearby watching, and Torres is putting an undercover unit in the area. You won't be alone. Jennifer, if they killed Thomas, if they're willing to— My voice cracked. I have children, grandchildren. What if they— They won't. Because you're visible now. You've talked to the FBI. You've made connections. Killing you now would raise too many questions. That's why the phone call was just a threat, trying to scare you into backing off. She paused. But we both know the real danger isn't death. It's that guardianship petition. Once they have legal control, they can isolate you completely, put you in a care facility, make you disappear without violence. The thought was somehow worse than a death threat. Being alive but powerless, locked away while my son dismantled everything Thomas and I had built, while he used my home as another piece in his criminal empire. Tell me the wire will work, I said. Tell me we'll get what Torres needs. Test it when you get home. Make sure the battery's charged. And Mrs. Jackson, don't be a hero. Just record what they say. That's all we need. I drove back to Cedar Falls as the sun rose, taking back roads, checking my mirrors constantly. The recording device was in my purse, small and innocuous. At home, I tested it as Jennifer had instructed, recording myself reading from a book, playing it back. The audio was clear, every word captured. I was wearing this device when my daughter arrived at noon. Sarah looked immaculate as always, designer suit, perfect makeup, her dark hair styled in the same severe bun she'd worn since law school. She hugged me briefly, her perfume expensive and unfamiliar. How are you feeling, Mom? Fine, sweetheart. Surprised by the visit, but happy to see you. She studied my face with clinical assessment. You look tired. Have you been sleeping well? Well enough. I kept my voice steady, grandmother-like. Exactly what they expected. Can I make you some tea? That would be nice. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd raised her, where she'd done her homework and planned her future. Now she sat across from me like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Mom, I want to talk about what's happening, about the concerns James has raised. What concerns? The memory issues, the confusion, the paranoid thoughts about him stealing from you. Sarah's tone was gentle but firm. These things happen as we age. There's no shame in it. I'm not confused, Sarah. I'm being set up. See, that's exactly what James said you'd say. This belief that everyone's conspiring against you. It's a symptom, Mom. It's your brain trying to make sense of gaps in your memory by creating narratives that aren't real. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sipped my tea and measured my words carefully. What if I could prove what I'm saying is true? Prove it how? Documents, evidence, things that show James isn't who you think he is. Sarah's expression hardened. Mom, I've seen the emails you sent James. I've talked to your doctor's office. They said you've missed 2 appointments and called 3 times asking about prescriptions you've never been prescribed. Your bank flagged unusual account activity. You've been withdrawing large amounts of cash, and when they asked why, you said you needed it for protection. These are facts, not theories. Every word she spoke was a lie built on manufactured evidence. James had been thorough, creating a paper trail of incompetence, planting false reports, probably bribing people to make statements. And Sarah, trained to trust documentation over emotion, believed every word. When do James and Michael arrive? I asked, changing tactics. 2:00. James thought it would be better if we talked first. Just you and me. Mother to daughter. She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. I want you to understand that we're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to help. And sometimes help means making hard decisions. Decisions like guardianship? Her hand tensed on mine. James mentioned you received that petition. You knew about it. Of course I knew. I reviewed the paperwork. As a lawyer, I wanted to make sure everything was filed correctly. She withdrew her hand. Mom, guardianship isn't a punishment. It's protection. You'd still live in your home, still have your independence, but there would be oversight. Someone to help manage your finances, Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Someone like James. James and Melissa would be the co-guardians, yes. But I'd be involved too. We'd all make decisions together, as a family. The recording device pressed against my skin, capturing every word. Sarah was incriminating herself without realizing it, admitting foreknowledge of the petition, confirming the family conspiracy. What about Michael? I asked. What does he think? Michael trusts James's judgment. He understands this is for the best. A car pulled into my driveway. Through the window, I saw James's silver BMW, and behind it, Michael's modest sedan. My sons, arriving together, united in their mission to save their mother from herself. Or so Michael believed. James walked in first, all smiles and concern. He hugged me tight, and I felt him scan the room with his eyes, cataloging, assessing. Melissa followed, carrying a casserole dish, playing the devoted daughter-in-law. Michael came last, his expression troubled but resigned. "Mom, you look good," James said, his voice warm. "I've been worried." "Have you?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. His smile didn't waver. "Of course. You're my mother. When Sarah told me about your concerns, about these ideas you've had, I knew we needed to have a family conversation." We gathered in the living room. Melissa set out the casserole, homemade chicken pot pie, my supposed favorite, though I'd always preferred beef. Small details James had never bothered to remember. "Mom," James began, settling into Thomas's old chair with casual ownership, "we need to talk about your future, about making sure you're taken care of. I take care of myself just fine. But you're getting older. The house is too big for one person. The maintenance, the worry, it's too much." He leaned forward, projecting sincerity. "What if something happened? What if you fell or had a medical emergency and no one was here to help? I have neighbors. I have a phone." "But is that enough?" Melissa interjected, her voice honey-sweet. "James and I have been discussing options. There's a beautiful assisted living facility in Portland, private apartments, medical staff on site, social activities. You'd have your independence, but also security. I'm not moving to a facility. No one's forcing you to do anything," James said quickly. "We're just exploring options. But Mom, we also need to discuss the house. This property, it's a significant asset. And frankly, it's not being used efficiently." There it was. The real agenda, barely 10 minutes into the conversation. "What do you mean, efficiently?" "I mean it's valuable real estate sitting empty most of the time. You're in just 3 rooms, bedroom, kitchen, living room. The rest is wasted space." James's tone became businesslike. "I've had the property appraised. With commercial zoning approval, this location could be worth over $1 million. That's money you could use for your care, for your future. My future in a facility you've chosen. A facility where you'd be safe and comfortable." He smiled. "Mom, I know change is scary, but you have to trust that we have your best interests at heart." Michael spoke up for the first time. "Mom, I think what James is saying makes sense. You shouldn't have to worry about property taxes and repairs and all that stress. Let us help handle these things." Sweet Michael, who'd always believed the best in everyone, who couldn't imagine his older brother was anything but helpful. "And the guardianship petition?" I asked, looking directly at James. "Was that about my best interest too?" The room went silent. James's expression flickered, just for a second, before the mask of concern returned. "The petition was Melissa's idea," he said carefully. "And honestly, I argued against it at first. But Mom, after the emails you've been sending, after talking to Sarah about your behavior, I realized she might be right. You're showing signs of decline, real signs. And legally, having guardianship in place protects you from making decisions that could harm you financially." "Like what?" "Like withdrawing large amounts of cash. Like making accusations about people, like—" He trailed off, as if the words were too painful to say. "Like accusing you of trying to steal my house." I finished. Melissa stood abruptly. "This is exactly what the doctors warned us about. The paranoia, the hostility toward family members trying to help. Mrs. Jackson, we love you, but you're not thinking clearly. My mind is perfectly clear. Clear enough to know that you filed guardianship papers before ever talking to me. Clear enough to know that James has already had this property appraised and rezoned. You're not planning to help me. You're planning to take everything I have. James's mask slipped further. His jaw tightened. His eyes went cold. Mom, you need to stop. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? Or am I finally seeing the truth about what my son has become? What I've become? James stood, his voice rising. I've become successful. I've built a business, provided for my family. I'm not the one living in the past, obsessing over Dad's old files, making wild accusations. How do you know about Thomas's files? The question hung in the air. James froze, realizing his mistake. Sarah mentioned you'd been going through old papers. No, she didn't. I never told Sarah about the files. I stood to face him. But you know about them because you've been watching me. Or having someone watch me. Just like someone followed me to the library. Just like someone left a photo on my door. You're not making sense, Melissa interjected desperately. This is the confusion we've been talking about. Is it confusion, or is it clarity? I looked at each of them. James with his barely controlled anger, Melissa with her calculated concern, Sarah with her legal assessment, Michael with his growing uncertainty. Here's what I think is really happening. I think James is involved in something criminal. I think he needs my house as part of a business deal. And I think all of this, the guardianship, the concerns about my memory, this intervention, it's all designed to get control of my assets before I can stop him. That's insane, James said flatly. Is it? Then why did Donald Holloway warn me about you? Why did he tell me you're running a fraud scheme that's hurt dozens of people? James's face went white. You talked to Donald? I did. And he told me everything. About the loans, the shell companies, the threats against his daughter. He told me you're not a legitimate businessman, James. You're a criminal. The word hung between us like a bomb. Michael stood up, confused. Wait, what's going on? James, what is she talking about? She's making things up, James said, but his voice lacked conviction. Donald Holloway was my partner. He embezzled from the company, and when I caught him, he created this elaborate lie to make himself look innocent. Then why did the FBI want to talk to me about you? I asked. Another mistake. James's eyes widened, and I saw genuine fear flash across his face before he controlled it. You talked to the FBI? His voice was dangerously quiet. I did. Because unlike you, I believe in the truth. Mom, if you talked to federal agents without a lawyer present, if you made statements about family matters you don't understand, you could have caused serious legal problems for all of us. James was speaking faster now, his lawyer voice engaging. Whatever they told you, whatever they implied, you need to understand they're building a case against Donald, not me. If they convinced you to make statements, they didn't convince me of anything. They confirmed what I already knew. Melissa grabbed her purse. We're leaving. This is pointless. No. James's command stopped her. He turned to Sarah and Michael. Did either of you know she was talking to federal agents? They shook their heads, both looking shaken. Mom, I need you to tell me exactly what you said to them, word for word. This is important. If you misrepresented facts about the business, about Donald, about the buyout, he ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. You could be charged with making false statements. Do you understand that? You could go to jail. Is that a threat? It's a fact. And it's why you need a guardian. You're making choices that could destroy your life, and you don't even realize it. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling Lawrence Pemberton. We're moving up the guardianship hearing, emergency basis. I'll testify that you're an immediate danger to yourself. You can't do that, Michael said uncertainly. I can, and I will, because if she's talking to the FBI, if she's making wild accusations, she's not competent to make her own decisions. James's eyes locked on mine, and I saw something in them I'd never seen before. Pure calculation, devoid of love or regret. I'm sorry, Mom, but you've forced my hand. He stepped into the hallway to make the call, his voice low and urgent. Sarah moved closer to me. Mom, what have you done? If you're involved in a federal investigation, I'm a witness, not a suspect. There's a difference. Not always. Her lawyer brain was working. If James is being investigated and you're talking to agents, you could be seen as cooperating against your own son. That makes you vulnerable. They could pressure you, manipulate you. Like James is manipulating all of you? She flinched, but didn't back down. I came here to help you. But if you're determined to destroy this family, there's nothing I can do. Michael approached, his face troubled. Mom, I don't understand what's happening. But James is right about one thing. You're acting different. These accusations, this paranoia. It's not like you. Maybe it is like me. Maybe I'm finally asking the questions I should have asked 8 years ago when your father died. What does Dad have to do with this? Everything. I looked at my youngest son, sweet, naive Michael, and made a choice. Your father was murdered, Michael, because he knew too much about corrupt real estate deals. And now your brother is following in the footsteps of the men who killed him. Michael stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Mom, that's crazy. Is it? Or is it the truth everyone's been too afraid to see? James returned, his face set. Pemberton's filing emergency papers now. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Until then, Mom, I strongly suggest you don't talk to anyone else. No FBI agents, no investigators, no one. For your own protection. Or for yours? He didn't answer. Instead, he gathered Melissa and headed toward the door. Sarah followed, shaking her head. Michael hesitated, looking between me and his brother. Michael, I said quietly, ask yourself why James is so afraid of what I might say. Ask yourself what he's really protecting. I'm protecting our family, James snapped. From you. They left, all of them, leaving me alone in the house that suddenly felt enormous and empty. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and removed the recording device. My hands shook as I played back the audio. Every word was there. James admitting he knew about Thomas's files, his reaction to Donald's name, his panic about the FBI, his threat to have me declared incompetent immediately. It was good. But was it enough? My phone rang. Jennifer. I heard everything, she said. Torres is listening to the recording now. She says it's strong, but James was careful. He didn't admit to any specific crimes. What about the emergency hearing? That's actually good for us. It means he's panicking, making rushed decisions. Panicked people make mistakes. She paused. Mrs. Jackson, there's something else. Donald Holloway just contacted me. He says he has physical evidence, documents proving James's connection to Caldwell, but he'll only hand them over to you, in person. Why me? He says it's insurance. If he gives them to the FBI or to me, James can claim they're forgeries. But if you have them, if you present them at the guardianship hearing, they become part of the legal record. Harder to dismiss. Where is he? An address in Salem. He wants to meet tonight. But Mrs. Jackson, it could be a trap. James knows Donald is the weak link. If he's gotten to him, if he's turned him, I have to take the risk. Without that evidence, tomorrow I lose everything. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. I'll drive you. And Torres is putting a protective detail on us. But we leave now, and we don't tell anyone where we're going. As I grabbed my coat, I noticed something on my kitchen table. An envelope that hadn't been there before, placed while everyone was in the living room, while I was distracted by confrontation. Inside was a photograph of Emma and Sophie, my granddaughters, walking out of their school. Someone had drawn red X's over their faces. On the back, in the same handwriting from the previous threat, stop now or they're next. The photograph of my granddaughters burned in my hand. I stared at those red X's, at Emma's bright smile and Sophie's missing front tooth, and felt something shift inside me. Fear transformed into fury. These people, whoever they were, had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I called Jennifer back immediately. Change of plans. Before we meet Donald, I need to make a stop. Where? James's house. I need to get Emma and Sophie somewhere safe. Mrs. Jackson, that's exactly what they want. They're baiting you into doing something rash, something they can use against you in court tomorrow. I don't care. Those children are innocent. I won't let them become casualties of their father's crimes. Jennifer was silent for a moment. Okay, But we do this smart. Torres will send officers to monitor James's house tonight. If anything happens, if anyone approaches those girls, they'll intervene. But you confronting James right now, after this afternoon's disaster, will only make things worse. She was right, but every instinct screamed at me to protect my grandchildren. Fine. But if anything happens to them, it won't. I promise. Jennifer's voice softened. Now let's go meet Donald. Whatever evidence he has, we need it before that hearing tomorrow. I met Jennifer 2 blocks from my house. She was driving a different car, a nondescript gray sedan that blended into traffic. As I slid into the passenger seat, I noticed a man in the back. Mrs. Jackson? This is Agent Torres's partner, Agent Reeves. He'll be our security for this meeting. Reeves nodded, but didn't speak. He had the alertness of someone trained to spot danger, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. We drove to Salem in tense silence. The address Donald had provided was a storage facility on the outskirts of town, rows of orange units under harsh fluorescent lights. My stomach tightened. This felt wrong. Unit 247, Jennifer said, checking her phone. He said to come alone, but I'm not letting you do that. He might run if he sees anyone else. Then he runs, but you're not walking into a dark storage unit without backup. We parked near the entrance. Reeves got out first, his hand resting casually on his hip in a way that suggested a concealed weapon. Jennifer and I followed, our footsteps echoing in the empty lot. Unit 247 was in the back row, its door slightly ajar. Light spilled from inside. "Donald?" I called out. "It's Megan Jackson." No response. Reeves moved forward carefully, pushing the door open wider with his foot. The unit was maybe 10 by 10 feet, crammed with boxes and filing cabinets. And sitting on a folding chair in the middle of it all was Donald Holloway. He looked terrible, thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and several days' worth of stubble. When he saw me, relief flooded his face. "Mrs. Jackson, thank you for coming." Then he noticed Reeves and Jennifer, and his expression changed. I said, "Come alone. If my son is as dangerous as you say, I wasn't going to take that chance." Donald stood slowly, his hands visible, non-threatening. "Who are they?" "People helping me." "Donald? Do you have the documents or not?" He moved to one of the filing cabinets and pulled out a thick folder. "Everything's here. Loan applications with forged signatures, shell company registrations, bank statements showing money moving between accounts, and most importantly, phone records showing regular contact between James and Richard Caldwell." Jennifer took the folder, examining the contents. Her eyes widened. "This is... Donald, this is enough to file charges. Why didn't you give this to the FBI months ago?" "Because I'm implicated in half of these documents. My signature is on the shell company paperwork. I approved fraudulent loans. If I turned this over, I'd be arrested alongside James." He looked at me. "But if you have them, if you present them as evidence you discovered independently, I'm just a name in the files. The focus stays on James and Caldwell." "You're asking me to lie," I said. "I'm asking you to survive. Because Mrs. Jackson, if James gets guardianship tomorrow, these documents disappear. He'll have legal access to your house, your papers, everything. He'll destroy any evidence you've gathered. And then he wins." Reeves spoke for the first time. "This isn't how we do things. Evidence has to maintain chain of custody. If Mrs. Jackson presents documents at a civil hearing without explaining where she got them, then they become part of the legal record before James can bury them." Donald interrupted. "Look, I know the rules. I also know how James operates. He's already planning his next move. That emergency guardianship hearing? He's going to have 3 doctors testify that Mrs. Jackson is incompetent. He's going to have bank records, witness statements, a complete picture of a woman in decline. The judge will have no choice but to grant guardianship. Unless I prove he's the one who's incompetent, or rather criminal." I reached for the folder. "I'll do it. I'll present these documents tomorrow." "Mrs. Jackson," Reeves warned, "if you misrepresent evidence in a court proceeding, I won't misrepresent anything. I'll simply say I found documents that raise questions about my son's business practices." "That's true. I am finding them right now." I met his gaze steadily. Sometimes you have to bend the rules to expose the truth. Donald pulled out another envelope. There's something else. Security camera footage from James's office building. This was harder to get, but I have a friend who manages the property. The footage shows James meeting with Caldwell multiple times over the past 6 months. It also shows James and Melissa entering your house 3 weeks ago when you weren't home. My blood ran cold. They were in my house? For about an hour. I don't know what they did, but it wasn't social. He handed me the envelope. The footage is time-stamped. It's authentic. Jennifer was studying her phone, frowning. We need to leave. Now. What's wrong? Torres just texted. Someone accessed the court database 20 minutes ago and pulled up information about tomorrow's hearing. The IP address traced back to the storage facility's Wi-Fi network. Donald went pale. That's impossible. I've been here alone all evening. Not quite, said a voice from the doorway. We spun around. A man stood silhouetted against the fluorescent lights. Tall, well-dressed, probably in his 60s. Even before he stepped into the light, I knew who he was. Richard Caldwell. Mrs. Jackson, he said with a pleasant smile. I've heard so much about you. James speaks of you fondly. Reeves had his gun drawn in an instant. FBI, don't move. Caldwell raised his hand slowly, still smiling. Of course. Though I should mention I'm not here alone either. My associates are currently in position around this facility. If anything unfortunate happens to me, they have instructions to respond accordingly. Is that a threat? Reeves demanded. It's a statement of fact. I'm a businessman, Agent Reeves. I deal in clear terms and mutual understanding. He looked at me. Mrs. Jackson, you've created quite a problem. I had such high hopes for your son. He reminded me of myself at that age. Ambitious, clever, willing to do what's necessary. But he made a mistake. He got emotional. By trying to steal from his own mother, by involving family in business, the two should never mix. It creates complications. Caldwell's tone was conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. I'm here to offer you a deal. Return those documents to Donald, forget everything you've learned, and let the guardianship proceed as planned. In exchange, I guarantee your grandchildren's safety. The casual mention of Emma and Sophie made my chest tighten. And if I refuse? Then tomorrow becomes very unpleasant for everyone. The hearing won't just be about your competency, it'll be about your stability. James will present evidence that you've made threats against his family, that you've been stalking him, harassing his business associates, making wild accusations to federal agents. By the time he's finished, you won't just lose guardianship. You'll be recommended for psychiatric evaluation. Jennifer stepped forward. Those are lies. We have recordings of James threatening her. Do you? How convenient. Except those recordings were made without proper consent, which makes them inadmissible in Oregon courts. James researched that very carefully. Caldwell's smile never wavered. You see, Mrs. Jackson, your son is very good at what he does. He learned from the best, and he's planned for every contingency. Except one, I said quietly. He didn't plan on me fighting back. But you're not fighting, are you? You're barely surviving. One recording that might not be admissible. Documents that could be dismissed as forgeries. And meanwhile, James has the full weight of the legal system supporting his case. 3 medical professionals. Multiple witnesses. A concerned family united in their assessment. Caldwell lowered his hands slowly. You can't win, Mrs. Jackson. But you can protect what matters most. My grandchildren. Exactly. Let James have the house. Let him have guardianship. In a few years, when the guardianship naturally expires or you pass away, everything reverts to your children according to your will. You'll have lived comfortably, your grandchildren will be safe, and James's business continues to thrive. Everyone wins. Except the people he's defrauded. Except the families he's destroyed. Caldwell's expression hardened slightly. Collateral damage. Every industry has it. Your late husband understood that, even if he lacked the stomach to participate. Don't you dare talk about Thomas. Why not? He was there, Mrs. Jackson, 12 years ago when the foundation of this operation was built. He saw what we were doing. He had chances to expose it, but he stayed quiet because he was afraid. Afraid of losing his job, his reputation, his comfortable life. So yes, He was complicit in his own way. His silence allowed the operation to continue. The words were designed to hurt, to shake my confidence in Thomas's memory. But they had the opposite effect. Because I knew the truth. Thomas had documented everything. He'd been building a case, gathering evidence. And then he'd died. You killed him, I said, because he was going to expose you. Caldwell's smile returned. Heart attacks are so common, so tragic, and so very difficult to prove otherwise, especially after 8 years. It was a confession, veiled, carefully worded, but unmistakable. And I was standing in a storage unit with an FBI agent as a witness. Reeves stepped closer to Caldwell. Richard Caldwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and... The lights went out. For 3 seconds, the storage facility was plunged into complete darkness. I heard Jennifer shout, heard Reeves curse, heard the sound of running feet. Then emergency lights flickered on, dim and red, casting everything in hellish shadows. Caldwell was gone. Stay here, Reeves ordered, running toward the door. Gunshots echoed across the facility. 3 rapid pops, followed by the screech of tires. Jennifer pulled me behind a filing cabinet. Donald crouched beside us, his face white with terror. They're going to kill us. They're going to kill all of us. No one's dying tonight, Jennifer said firmly. She pulled out her phone, dialing frantically. Torres, we need immediate backup at the Salem storage facility. Shots fired. Caldwell was here. He ran and... More gunshots, closer this time. Then silence. Reeves appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. They're gone. 2 vehicles, both heading east. Local police are pursuing, but they had a head start. Is anyone hurt? I asked. They weren't shooting at us. They were shooting out security cameras. He holstered his weapon. They didn't want footage of Caldwell being here. But they got sloppy. There are traffic cameras at the intersection. We'll have something. Jennifer helped me to my feet. My legs felt weak. My heart racing. What happens now? Now we get you somewhere safe. Because Caldwell knows you have those documents, and he knows you won't give them up. Reeves looked at Donald. You too. You're both witnesses now. That makes you valuable and vulnerable. We left the storage facility with police sirens wailing in the distance. Jennifer drove us to a safe house, an anonymous apartment in a residential complex, secured by federal agents. Donald was taken to a separate location. It was 3 a.m. when I finally sat down with the documents spread across a dining table. Jennifer and Agent Torres, who'd arrived an hour earlier, reviewed everything methodically. This is good, Torres said finally. Really good. The phone records alone establish a pattern of contact between James and Caldwell. The bank statements show money laundering, and the security footage of them entering your house, that's breaking and entering at minimum, possibly conspiracy to commit fraud. But Caldwell escaped, I said. He's gone, and he'll warn James. Let him, because we're not waiting for tomorrow's hearing anymore. We're executing search warrants tonight. Torres checked her watch. In about 2 hours, simultaneous raids on James's office, his home, and 3 properties connected to Caldwell. Whatever evidence they haven't destroyed yet, we'll get it. What about the guardianship hearing? You're still going. Because that's where James will be, expecting an easy victory, and that's where we'll arrest him. Torres's expression was grim. I need you to be strong tomorrow, Mrs. Jackson. I need you to sit in that courtroom and let James make his case. Let him present his doctors and his witnesses and his manufactured evidence. And then, when he thinks he's won, we move. You're using me as bait. I'm giving you a chance to face your son in a moment when he thinks he's untouchable, when his guard is down and his arrogance is up. That's when people reveal who they really are. I thought about Emma and Sophie, about Thomas's memory, about the 23 families James had destroyed. What do I need to do? Be yourself. Be the strong, intelligent woman who raised 3 children and ran a business and figured out a conspiracy that took us 18 months to unravel. Show that judge, show your family, show James that you're nobody's victim. Jennifer squeezed my hand. You can do this. I looked at the documents, evidence of my son's crimes, proof of his betrayal, the key to saving my home and my freedom. And I thought about what Donald had said. Sometimes you have to bend the rules to expose the truth. I'll do more than that, I said quietly. I'll make him confess. Torres raised an eyebrow. How? Because I know James. I know how he thinks, how he operates. He believes he's smarter than everyone else, that he's planned for every contingency. But he's forgotten something important. What's that? I'm his mother. I know exactly which buttons to push. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I walked into the courthouse wearing my best dress and carrying a folder of documents. James was already there with Lawrence Pemberton, his lawyer, and Melissa beside him looking perfectly composed. Sarah sat behind them in the gallery, her professional mask in place. Michael was there too, looking uncomfortable and conflicted. James saw me and smiled, the confident smile of someone who thought he'd already won. He had no idea that FBI agents were positioned throughout the courthouse, that search warrants were being executed at that very moment, that every word spoken in this courtroom would be recorded and used against him. The judge entered, an older woman with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. This is an emergency hearing regarding the guardianship petition for Ann Jackson. Mr. Pemberton, you may proceed. And so began the final confrontation, with my son about to learn that underestimating your mother is the most dangerous mistake a man can make. Lawrence Pemberton stood before the judge with practiced confidence. Your Honor, we're here because the Jackson family is facing a heartbreaking situation. Mrs. Megan Jackson, a woman we all love and respect, is suffering from cognitive decline that has progressed to the point where she can no longer safely manage her own affairs. I sat at my table with a court-appointed attorney beside me, a young woman named Rachel Barr, who'd been briefed by Torres and knew exactly what was about to unfold. I kept my expression neutral, my hands folded calmly on the table. Let them think I was confused, fragile, defeated. We have 3 medical professionals prepared to testify, Pemberton continued. Dr. Harrison from Cedar Falls Medical, who will discuss Mrs. Jackson's missed appointments and concerning phone calls. Dr. Patricia Barr, a neurologist who reviewed Mrs. Jackson's medical history and documented behavioral changes. And Dr. Robert Marsh, a psychiatrist who evaluated Mrs. Jackson's recent statements and found evidence of paranoid delusions. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Jackson, do you understand why we're here today? I stood slowly, steadying myself on the table as if my legs were weak, playing the part they expected. I understand my son wants to take my house. A ripple of sympathy crossed the judge's face, exactly what James had calculated. Poor, confused elderly woman, unable to grasp the complexity of legal guardianship. Mrs. Jackson, this isn't about taking your house, the judge said gently. This is about making sure you have support and protection. Please sit down. Your attorney will represent you. I sat, catching James's expression. Satisfaction mixed with what might have been genuine sadness. Maybe some part of him actually believed he was helping me? Or maybe he'd simply convinced himself that stealing from his mother was justified because I was old and he was smart. Dr. Harrison testified first. He described appointments I'd allegedly missed, phone calls where I'd asked about medications I'd never been prescribed, signs of memory loss and confusion. His testimony was smooth, rehearsed, and completely fabricated. When Rachel cross-examined him, she was gentle. Doctor, Harrison, do you have actual records of these phone calls? The receptionist documented them in our system. Could we see those records? I'd need to request them from the office. So you don't have them here today? No, but... And these missed appointments? Could Mrs. Jackson have simply rescheduled them? Well, yes, but the pattern suggests... Thank you, doctor. Rachel sat down, having planted seeds of doubt without being aggressive. We didn't need to destroy their case yet. Just create cracks. Dr. Barr, the neurologist, was more credible. She'd reviewed my medical history, real records, real data, and constructed a narrative of age-related cognitive decline. It was compelling because it was technically possible, even if it wasn't true. Rachel asked only one question. Dr. Barr, have you ever actually examined Mrs. Jackson in person? No, but based on the documented evidence. Thank you. Then came Dr. Marsh, the psychiatrist. This was the dangerous one. He'd been hired specifically to diagnose paranoid delusions, and his testimony was designed to make me sound unstable. Mrs. Jackson has made repeated accusations that her son is involved in criminal activity, Dr. Marsh said. She believes there's a conspiracy to steal her property. She's claimed her late husband was murdered, despite medical evidence of natural causes. These beliefs are not based in reality, but rather represent a pattern of paranoid thinking common in certain degenerative conditions. I felt Michael shift uncomfortably behind me. Even Sarah looked uncertain. They were hearing their mother described as mentally ill, and some part of them was questioning whether it might be true. Pemberton called James to the stand. My son looked appropriately concerned, tie slightly loose, hair a bit disheveled, as if he'd been losing sleep over his mother's condition. He was good at this. He'd probably been practicing. Mr. Jackson, tell us about your mother's recent behavior. James took a deep breath. It's been difficult to watch. Mom's always been sharp, independent, but over the past few months, things have changed. She sent me emails that didn't make sense, rambling about my father's old work files, asking about people I don't know. When I tried to discuss estate planning with her, she'd forget we'd talked about it, then accuse me of never mentioning it. Did she make accusations against you specifically? Yes. James's voice cracked convincingly. She said I was trying to steal her house, that I was involved in fraud. She even claimed I'd threatened her, which is... He shook his head. It broke my heart, because I know she believes these things. In her mind, they're real, but they're not. I love my mother. I just want her safe. The judge was watching him with sympathy. The gallery was silent. Even Rachel looked concerned, as if she was wondering whether we'd misjudged the situation. Then it was Rachel's turn to cross-examine. Mr. Jackson, you mentioned estate planning. Did you recommend a specific attorney to your mother? Yes. Lawrence Pemberton, who's representing our family today. And Mr. Pemberton is also the registered agent for a company called Riverside Holdings, LLC, correct? James blinked. I'm not sure. He handles various corporate matters. Riverside Holdings, LLC is the entity listed on a property transfer document that bears your mother's signature. A document that would transfer her house to this company. Are you familiar with that document? Pemberton stood quickly. Your Honor, this is beyond the scope. I'll allow it, the judge said, her expression sharpening. Mr. Jackson, answer the question. I don't know anything about that document. Really? Because Riverside Holdings was registered 3 months ago, the same week you first mentioned estate planning to your mother. Isn't that quite a coincidence? I suppose, but... And you had your mother's property appraised recently, didn't you? For commercial development potential? James's composure cracked slightly. That was just preliminary research. I thought if Mom ever decided to sell... But she hasn't decided to sell. In fact, she specifically said she wants to keep her house. Yet somehow, a property transfer document with her signature already exists. Rachel's voice was calm but relentless. Mr. Jackson, did you forge your mother's signature on that document? No, of course not. I've never even seen... Then how do you explain that it exists? How do you explain that the document is dated next month, as if the transfer was already planned? Your Honor, my client is not on trial here, Pemberton interjected desperately. Isn't he? The judge's gaze had gone cold. Because it's starting to sound like this guardianship petition isn't about Mrs. Jackson's welfare at all. That's when I stood up. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge nodded slowly. Mrs. Jackson, you have the right to address the court. I walked to the witness stand, steady and clear-eyed. No trembling, no confusion. Just a woman who'd made a decision and was prepared to see it through. My son is correct about one thing, I began. I have been acting differently. I've been asking questions, investigating, making accusations. But not because I'm confused. Because I discovered the truth about what James has been doing. I pulled out the folder Donald had given me and handed it to the judge. These are documents showing a pattern of fraud committed by my son. Forged loan applications, shell company registrations, bank records showing money laundering, phone records proving regular contact with a man named Richard Caldwell. who's currently under federal investigation for real estate fraud. The courtroom erupted. Pemberton was shouting objections. James had gone white. Sarah and Michael were on their feet, stunned. The judge banged her gavel. "Order! Everyone sit down and be quiet, or I'll clear this courtroom." Silence fell. The judge examined the documents, her expression growing darker with each page she turned. "Mrs. Jackson," she said finally, "where did you obtain these documents?" "From my son's former business partner, Donald Holloway. The man James claimed moved to Singapore but who's actually been in hiding because James threatened his family." "These are lies," James said, his voice rising. "She's been talking to the FBI. They've manipulated her." "I have been talking to the FBI," I confirmed. "Because unlike you, James, I believe in the truth. And the truth is that you've been running an elder fraud scheme for 3 years. 23 victims, $4 million stolen. And when your partner developed a conscience, you destroyed his life to keep him quiet." "Mom, you're confused." "Am I? Then explain the security camera footage showing you and Melissa breaking into my house 3 weeks ago. Explain why you've been meeting regularly with Richard Caldwell, a known criminal. Explain why you filed this guardianship petition the same day I started asking questions about your business." James looked at Pemberton desperately. The lawyer was frantically whispering into his phone, probably trying to reach Caldwell, not knowing that federal agents were at that moment going through every file in both their offices. "Your Honor," I continued, "my son didn't file this petition to protect me. He filed it to silence me, to gain legal control over my assets so he could complete the largest theft of his career, stealing from his own mother. And he manufactured evidence of my incompetence to make it look legitimate." The judge set down the documents. "Mr. Pemberton, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I expect a truthful answer. Did you prepare a property transfer document for Mrs. Jackson's residence?" Pemberton's face had gone gray. "Your Honor, attorney-client privilege prevents me from—" "Attorney-client privilege does not protect ongoing fraud. Answer the question." Before Pemberton could respond, the courtroom doors opened. Agent Torres walked in, flanked by 4 other FBI agents. "Your Honor, I'm Special Agent Carmen Torres, FBI. We have warrants for the arrest of James Jackson and Lawrence Pemberton on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and money laundering." James stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. "This is insane. Mom, tell them what?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing my child's face. "That you're innocent? That I'm confused? James, I found your father's files. I know you've been following Caldwell's playbook since you were 23 years old. I know you saw Thomas's death as an opportunity, not a tragedy, because it meant no one was left to warn you away from this path. That's not true. I loved Dad. You loved the idea of not being like him, of being richer, more successful, more ruthless. And you convinced yourself that made you better than him. But Thomas was 10 times the man you'll ever be because he understood something you never did. Integrity matters more than wealth." Tears were streaming down James's face now. Whether from genuine emotion or fear of prison, I couldn't tell. Maybe he didn't know either. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Mom, I'm so sorry. So am I." My voice was steady despite the breaking of my heart. "I'm sorry I didn't see this sooner. I'm sorry I didn't ask harder questions when you bought that expensive house and those luxury cars on a consultant's salary. I'm sorry I wanted to believe the best of you instead of facing the truth." Torres stepped forward. "James Jackson, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." As the agents led James away, he looked back at me one last time. In his eyes, I saw confusion, fear, and something that might have been genuine regret. But it was too late for regret. Too late for apologies. He'd made his choices, and now he'd face the consequences. Melissa was in handcuffs too. She'd been arrested at home when the search warrant was executed. Sarah sat in the gallery, her face buried in her hands. Michael stared straight ahead in shock. The judge cleared her throat. "Mrs. Jackson, it appears this guardianship petition was filed under false pretenses. I'm dismissing it immediately and ordering an investigation into who falsified the medical evidence presented today. I'm also issuing an injunction preventing any transfer or sale of your property pending the outcome of the federal investigation. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me. You did the hard work. She looked at me with something like respect. Not many people would have the courage to do what you just did. Outside the courthouse, Jennifer was waiting with Donald. They'd watched the proceedings from a secure location, ready to testify if needed. You were magnificent, Jennifer said, hugging me. I was terrified. That's what made it magnificent. Being brave isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right anyway. Donald approached hesitantly. Mrs. Jackson, I don't expect forgiveness for my part in this. But thank you for giving me a chance to make it right. You'll testify against Caldwell? Every word. They arrested him 3 hours ago, trying to board a private plane to Costa Rica. He's not getting away this time. Over the following weeks, the full scope of James's operation came to light. 23 victims became 38 as more people came forward. The total losses exceeded $6 million. James, Melissa, Caldwell, and Pemberton all faced multiple federal charges. The trial wouldn't happen for months, maybe years. But the evidence was overwhelming. Sarah flew back to Boston without saying goodbye, though she sent a brief email apologizing for not believing me. Michael came to the house one evening, sat in the kitchen, and cried. I should have known, he said. I should have seen it. He fooled all of us, sweetheart. That's what con artists do best. But you figured it out. Because I had to. Because I didn't have the luxury of believing the comfortable lie. I squeezed his hand. Michael, you're a good man. You're more like your father than James ever was. Hold on to that. Emma and Sophie were the hardest part. Telling 2 little girls that their father was in jail, that their mother was facing charges too, that their lives had fundamentally changed. It was a conversation I'd never imagined having. But they came to live with me while the legal situation sorted itself out. My big house, once too large for one person, filled with laughter and homework and the beautiful chaos of children. I taught them to garden, to bake, to appreciate the simple satisfaction of work well done. And sometimes, when I was tucking them in at night, they'd ask about their father. I'd tell them the truth, age-appropriate but honest, that he'd made terrible choices, that he'd hurt people, but that somewhere underneath the criminal was a boy I'd loved, a son I'd raised to be better. Do you still love him, Grandma? Sophie asked one night. I love the person he could have been, I said, and I hope that someday he'll become that person. 6 months after the arrests, the FBI recovered nearly $4 million in assets. The process of returning money to victims would take years, but at least it was happening. At least there was justice. My house remained mine, of course. The forged property transfer was voided. I updated my will, leaving everything in equal shares to Sarah, Michael, Emma, and Sophie. Not James. Even if he someday earned forgiveness, he'd already taken too much. Jennifer and I stayed in touch. She'd moved on to other cases, other investigations. But she stopped by occasionally for tea and conversation. She'd become a friend, forged in crisis, tested by danger. And Donald, he received immunity for his testimony and started over with a different career, in a different city, trying to rebuild a life destroyed by his association with James. He sent me a Christmas card with a photo of his daughter, healthy and happy and safely finishing college. On a sunny afternoon in late spring, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and Thomas's old files spread across the table. I'd finally organized them properly, documenting the history my husband had tried to preserve. I was donating them to a legal advocacy group that helped fraud victims. Maybe Thomas's careful notes would help someone else the way they'd helped me. Michael drove up with Emma and Sophie, coming for Sunday dinner as they did every week now. The girls ran to the garden, checking on the vegetables we'd planted together. Mom, Michael said, settling into the chair beside me. I've been thinking about something. About what you did. How you fought back when everyone said you couldn't. How you saved yourself and protected all of us. I did what needed to be done. But that's the thing. You didn't just survive. You won. Against someone younger, supposedly smarter, with money and lawyers and manipulation. You beat him by being patient and strategic and brave, and by accepting help. I didn't do this alone, but you led the fight, and I think—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I think I spent my whole life believing that people like James, aggressive, ambitious, ruthless, were the ones who succeeded in this world. But you proved that wisdom and integrity are more powerful than any of that." I looked at my youngest son, at the goodness in his face, and felt proud. Your father believed that too. He lived it every day, even when it cost him, and in the end, his integrity outlasted all of Caldwell's schemes. Emma called from the garden, excited about a tomato that had turned red. Sophie was chasing a butterfly. Normal, beautiful, innocent moments. "They're going to be okay," I said, watching my granddaughters. "Because of you," Michael replied. "Because we're family. The real kind. The kind that protects and nurtures and tells the truth, even when it hurts." That evening, after dinner and stories and goodnight kisses, I stood in my bedroom and looked at the photograph of Thomas on my nightstand. The man I'd loved for 32 years, who'd tried to do the right thing and paid for it with his life. "I finished it," I told his photo. "What you started, I finished. And our grandchildren are safe." The house settled around me with familiar creaks and whispers. My house. My home. The place where I'd raised children and buried dreams and ultimately discovered a strength I didn't know I possessed. They'd tried to take it from me. They'd tried to silence me, dismiss me, label me incompetent because I was old and they were young. But I'd proven something more important than my own innocence. I'd proven that age is not weakness. That a woman who's lived 63 years, who's raised children and buried a husband and survived grief and joy and everything in between, has accumulated something more valuable than youth or ambition: wisdom, patience, the absolute certainty of knowing who you are and what you stand for. And in the end, that certainty was the most powerful weapon of all. I slept peacefully that night, in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and a battle righteously won. The victory was mine, silent, complete, and absolutely earned. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.